The hum of Ecliptor Station's engines resonated deep within Daniel Carter's bones as he stood in the shadow of the towering gates to the Galactic Peacekeeper Academy. The station, a sprawling network of metallic spires and bustling hallways, was both a monument to the diversity of the galaxy and a symbol of its rigid hierarchy. It was a place where species from across the stars came to learn, to become peacekeepers, protectors of the galaxy. And yet, despite its noble purpose, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't belong here. He limped forward, the weight of his injuries pressing on him with every step. A fresh stitch crossed his brow, purple and raw, remnants of a battle fought on a faraway colony. His left foot was bound in a bulky medical boot, his body screaming in pain with every step, but he didn't complain. Not here, not now. This was the moment he had fought for. The academy gates were vast, towering above him like a ceremonial doorway to a world he had only dreamed of. Beyond it lay a future he was determined to carve out for himself, for Earth. He had been given a second chance, a rare invitation to join the academy, one that most Earthborns would never receive. And yet, despite all his training, all the years of sacrifice, the odds were stacked against him. The academy was not built for humans. He was an anomaly, the last of a dying breed, an Earthborn. The gates swung open, and Daniel was met by a bustling plaza filled with cadets, their laughter echoing across the courtyard like the sound of metal against metal. Some were humanoid, others far more alien, their skins shining in hues Daniel had only seen in holomaps. Clusters of cadets moved in and out of the plaza, their synth skin and armored uniforms gleaming under the pale light. But it wasn't their appearance that caught Daniel's attention, it was their eyes. The unblinking, metallic gaze of the academy's elite. They were watching him. His presence caused a stir among the cadets. The chatter softened as their eyes narrowed in his direction. Whispers turned into chuckles, and then into outright mocking laughter. "Earthborn," someone called out, the word like a sneer. The laughter intensified, a sound that echoed with contempt. "What's he going to do, bleed on us?" Another cadet jeered, their voice dripping with amusement. Daniel didn't flinch. His ribs burned with each shallow breath, but he kept his head high, ignoring the sting of their ridicule. He had heard worse on Earth. He had endured worse. This was nothing. The mockery continued as a tall cadet, nearly 2 feet taller than Daniel, strode forward. His skin was a deep rust color, muscles rippling beneath his battle suit, the insignia of a top-tier cadet gleaming on his chest. He stepped right in front of Daniel, blocking his path. "No augments?" the alien cadet asked, his voice thick with mockery. His glossy skin twitched with amusement and his eyes gleamed with disdain. "No rebreathers, not even adaptive dermal shielding." Daniel looked up at the towering figure, his eyes cold but steady. His injuries ached, but there was a fire in him, a fire that could never be extinguished. "No," Daniel said flatly. "No augments, no shields, just me." The cadet smirked, stepping even closer, his imposing figure looming over Daniel like a shadow. "What are you going to do about it, Earthborn?" he sneered. "You can't even stand straight." A flicker of movement caught Daniel's eye. The plaza, once filled with laughter, had quieted. The cadets were watching now, their attention focused on the interaction. The cadet squad, standing a few feet away, chuckled, waiting for their leader's next move. They were waiting for Daniel to crumble, to prove their point that Earthborns had no place in a place like this. But Daniel's voice, low and even, cut through the silence. "If you get any closer," he said, his gaze unwavering, "you'll leave here without your limbs." The words hung in the air like a challenge. The alien cadet blinked once and the plaza fell deathly silent. His squad looked at him, unsure of how to respond. Then, as if reading the situation, the cadet's smile faded, replaced by a wary tension. "Leave him alone," someone muttered from the group. But the damage was done. The laughter that had once filled the plaza shifted. It was no longer directed at Daniel, but at their own teammate who stood frozen, unsure of how to proceed. The cadet stared down at Daniel, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Daniel thought he might attack, but instead, the alien stepped back, his pride taking a hit in front of his peers. He wasn't used to being challenged by someone who didn't even have the advantage of augmented limbs or enhanced tech. Before either could speak, a sharp chirp broke the tension. The Academy's gate scanner flashed a red light over the crowd, its robotic voice booming through the plaza in crisp galactic basic. "Earthborn, do not engage." The words appeared on the scanner's display in bright red letters. Daniel's heart pounded. His stance remained unchanged as the crowd grew still. The scanner continued, its tone more formal now. Warning, trained in human strike combat. Muay Thai limb loss likely. Avoid physical engagement. The crowd's reaction was immediate. A murmur of surprise, followed by a few hushed voices of disbelief. The cadet who had challenged Daniel stood still, his expression now frozen in a mix of shock and disbelief. The cadets who had been laughing moments ago were now staring at Daniel with new eyes. The Vusk cadet, still towering over Daniel, hesitated. He turned to look at his squad. The mockery that had once been so bold now faltered. Daniel had just become someone to fear. Commander Havett, the Academy's top officer, strode into the plaza with a commanding presence. His slender, scale-covered frame stood tall and composed, his eyes sharp and calculating. He surveyed the scene, his gaze flicking from Daniel to the cadet. "You didn't think to issue a more formal warning?" Havett's voice was calm but carried authority. "I did," Daniel replied, his voice steady. He didn't listen. Havett didn't respond immediately. The cadet who had challenged Daniel stood in the background, his face twitching with annoyance but saying nothing. Instead, Havett's gaze fixed on Daniel, studying him carefully. "Proceed to medical clearance," Havett finally said. "Your injuries are your own, Earthborn." Daniel nodded, his chest swelling with pride despite the sharp pain in his ribs. The crowd, once so eager to mock him, now parted without a word, their faces drawn in a mix of respect and fear. As Daniel limped toward the medical checkpoint, the words on the scanner replayed in his mind. "Do not engage." He had made it. His first step into the Galactic Peacekeeper Academy was complete. But as he passed through the gates, a quiet realization settled in his gut. He wasn't just fighting to belong. He was fighting to change everything. And this was just the beginning. Daniel Carter sat in the Academy's waiting room, his back stiff from the day's physical exertions. His body screamed for rest, but his mind wouldn't let him. The earlier confrontation had left him shaken, though the mockery had stopped as soon as the scanner had issued its warning. The quiet respect that followed was almost more unnerving than the taunts had been. For the first time since he'd arrived at Ecliptor Station, Daniel felt like an alien. The Academy wasn't like Earth. The air smelled different, sterile and metallic, like the inside of an old spacecraft, and the corridors stretched on endlessly, leading to classrooms and training areas where the brightest minds of the galaxy honed their skills. The Peacekeeper Academy wasn't just a place of learning, it was a battleground for the future. Its cadets would one day stand as the guardians of peace in a galaxy riven by conflict. But in Daniel's mind, it wasn't just a dream. It was his only chance for Earth to have a place among the stars. Daniel's thoughts were interrupted when the door to the waiting room opened, and a tall figure stepped inside. He recognized the uniform immediately, Commander Havett, one of the Academy's highest-ranking officers. His cold, calculating gaze swept over Daniel as he approached. "Carter," Havett said with a nod, his voice as smooth as polished glass. "We've been watching you. Your first test was unexpected, but you've earned some respect here. The cadets are whispering about you." "I've heard the whispers," Daniel replied, his voice hoarse. Despite the exhaustion pulling at him, he couldn't stop himself from meeting the commander's gaze. "I didn't come here to be anyone's curiosity. I'm here to prove we belong." Havett didn't respond to that. Instead, he motioned for Daniel to follow him. "Come," the commander said. "There's something you need to see." The Academy's inner sanctum was a stark contrast to the public spaces. The walls were lined with high-tech consoles, holographic maps of far-off planets rotating in midair, their surfaces covered with ever-changing data. They were the pulse of the galaxy, the lifeblood of the Peacekeeper Academy's operations. As they walked deeper into the facility, Havett led Daniel to a large chamber at the back of the building. This room was unlike any other Daniel had seen before. It was vast, with a low ceiling that seemed to hum with the soft buzz of energy. At the center was a raised platform, surrounded by seats, with a large holographic screen hovering overhead. "Sit," Havett ordered, gesturing to the chairs around the platform. Daniel hesitated, but then complied. Havett seated himself across from him, his gaze fixed on the screen. "What is this place?" Daniel asked, his curiosity piqued. "This," Havett said, "is the command room. It's where we monitor everything, training, cadet progress, and most importantly, where we evaluate the threat levels of incoming species and potential peacekeeping missions. A few taps on the console, and the holographic screen flickered to life. A map of the galaxy appeared, showing countless star systems and their respective threat ratings. But the thing that caught Daniel's eye wasn't the map. It was the large section of the screen devoted to Earth. Earthborn, Havitt murmured almost to himself. The Council has made it clear, Earthborns are to be watched closely. You're part of an experiment, Carter. The Academy's acceptance of you was never guaranteed. You're here because of a decision that was made from above, not because of your own merit. Daniel's heart sank. The weight of Havitt's words hit him like a ton of bricks. He had known this would be hard, but the idea that his acceptance had been political made his skin crawl. An experiment, Daniel echoed. What does that mean? It means you're not like the others. Your kind doesn't belong here, not according to most species. You'll be monitored closely, Carter. Every step you take, every action you make will be scrutinized. The Academy has only just begun to allow Earthborns into its ranks, and you're the first of your kind to make it this far. But make no mistake, your future here is uncertain. Daniel's fists clenched. He wasn't here to be treated like a lab rat, to be the subject of someone's experiment. He was here because he had earned it. I don't need their pity, Daniel said, his voice steady. I'm here because I belong here. I'll prove it. Havitt raised an eyebrow. Prove it you will, Earthborn, but not the way you think. The commander tapped a few more buttons on the console, and the screen shifted, showing a series of cadet profiles. At the center was one cadet in particular, Volkari, a towering alien whose augmentations made him nearly impervious to conventional weapons. Volkari is one of the Academy's top cadets, Havitt said. He's been training here for over a decade. His species is renowned for their combat prowess, and their abilities are augmented by advanced biotech. You, on the other hand, are human, a species known for its resilience. But in this academy, resilience isn't enough. You're going to need more than just strength. You're going to need to be smarter, faster, and above all, adaptable. The holographic image of Volkari blinked and dissolved. Then Havitt locked eyes with Daniel. Your next challenge is a combat test, Carter. It's not just a physical test, it's a mental one. You'll be facing Volkari in the Academy's advanced training arena. Daniel straightened, the challenge stoking the fire inside him. When? Soon, Havitt replied. The test is mandatory for all cadets aiming for field assignment, but in your case, it's more. It's your chance to show them all that Earthborns aren't just survivors, we thrive. The commander turned to leave, but paused at the door. One more thing, Carter, Havitt said. You'll be watched closely, but don't forget, this is the galaxy's last chance to see what humans are capable of. Make them believe. Prove that your species isn't to be underestimated. The door slid shut behind Daniel, leaving him alone in the dimly lit room. His mind raced, the weight of Havitt's words heavy on his shoulders. But even as doubt crept into the corners of his thoughts, one thing was clear. He wasn't just fighting for his place at the Academy. He was fighting for humanity. The training arena was cold and sterile, its walls a gleaming white that seemed to pulse with the hum of distant machinery. The floor was smooth, made of a durable material designed to withstand the heaviest blows, and the air had that familiar metallic scent, one that reminded Daniel of old ships, their engines humming in the background, ready for a new mission. The arena was filled with spectators, cadets who had been selected to witness the final stages of Daniel's challenge. Among them were his allies, Jorak, Kell, and a few others who had quietly supported him. But even with their presence, Daniel felt the weight of all eyes on him. He was no longer just a human among aliens. He was an experiment, a symbol of something far bigger than himself. Across the arena, Volkari stood with his arms folded, his towering frame casting a shadow across the floor. His skin was a deep, polished black, and his biotechnological enhancements glinted under the harsh overhead lights. His eyes were like polished onyx, black and unblinking, studying Daniel with cold calculation. Volkari was everything Daniel was not, augmented, nearly indestructible, and intimidating in every sense of the word. His reputation alone was enough to make even the bravest cadets hesitate. Yet here he was, facing a human who, to many, was still a relic of a dying species. Daniel's pulse quickened as he stepped onto the arena floor. His injuries were still fresh, his body aching from the earlier tests. His ribs throbbed with each breath, his boot still heavy on his foot, the ligament damage in his ankle nagging with every step. But he pushed the pain to the back of his mind. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. The voice of the arena's announcer rang through the speakers, a crisp, mechanical tone that echoed in the vast space. Cadets prepare for the combat test. Daniel Carter versus Volcari. Rules, non-lethal combat only. The first to incapacitate their opponent or force a retreat wins. The arena will be set to combat mode. Start time now. A loud hum filled the air as the arena's walls shifted, transforming into a maze of obstacles, tall pillars, low walls, and hidden corners designed to force cadets into using both strategy and raw power. The floor beneath Daniel's feet vibrated as the battle was about to begin. The moment the announcement ended, Volcari sprang into action. His movements were a blur of speed and power, each step calculated, each strike designed to incapacitate. He rushed toward Daniel, his enhanced limbs carrying him faster than any human could hope to move. Daniel barely had time to react. He ducked under Volcari's first strike, a powerful punch that would have shattered bones if it had connected. Daniel rolled to the side, using his momentum to get behind one of the pillars, his heart pounding in his chest. The roar of the crowd faded as the adrenaline coursed through him. This wasn't just a fight, it was a statement. The Volcari cadet circled, his eyes narrowing as he watched Daniel carefully. Volcari was confident, perhaps too confident. He didn't know what Daniel could do. "Is that all, Earthborn?" Volcari taunted, his voice low and mocking. "I expected more from you." Daniel remained silent, focusing on the battle before him. He wasn't here to talk, he was here to prove a point. Volcari lunged again, but this time Daniel was ready. He sidestepped, his body moving instinctively, and caught Volcari's arm in a clinch. His elbow dug into Volcari's side, the strike sharp and precise. The alien cadet hissed, his face contorting in pain, but he didn't pull back. Instead, he tried to throw Daniel off with a violent twist of his body. But Daniel held on, refusing to let go. His training, his time spent in the gyms of Earth, kicked in. He wasn't just fighting for survival, he was fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy, and that was something no alien could take from him. Volcari's strength was immense, but Daniel was faster, more nimble. As the alien struggled to break free, Daniel swept his leg behind Volcari's and took him down in a swift motion. The crowd gasped in surprise as the towering Volcari hit the floor with a heavy thud, the impact vibrating through the arena. Daniel didn't hesitate. He moved in close, landing a knee strike to Volcari's side. The alien's body spasmed, a sharp cry escaping his lips. Daniel pulled back quickly, just in time to avoid a retaliatory swipe from Volcari's enhanced arm. The blow missed, and Daniel used the opportunity to roll out of range. The crowd was silent, watching the fight unfold with bated breath. This was no longer just a test, it was a spectacle. Daniel Carter, the Earthborn, was proving himself against one of the Academy's most formidable cadets. Volcari stood slowly, his breathing labored, but his expression was one of pure fury. His augmented body wasn't invincible, not when it came up against human determination and ingenuity. "This isn't over," Volcari growled, his eyes flicking toward Daniel with cold resolve. "I'll show you why Earthborns don't belong here." Before Daniel could respond, Volcari charged again, his movements faster than before. He was no longer holding back. The strikes came in quick succession, each one designed to incapacitate. But Daniel, despite his injuries, dodged and countered, each move calculated, each strike aimed at Volcari's vulnerabilities. It was a test of endurance now. Daniel's body was bruised and battered, his ribs aching with each breath, but he refused to give in. The crowd's whispers turned to murmurs of awe as Daniel continued to dodge and strike with precision. Then, just as Volcari moved in for the final blow, Daniel saw an opening. He ducked low, sweeping his leg under Volcari's feet, sending the alien crashing to the ground once again. This time, Daniel was ready. He stepped forward, locking Volcari's arms and pressing him to the floor with the weight of his body. Volcari struggled, but Daniel held firm, his muscles screaming, his chest tight from the pain, but his grip unyielding. "I told you," Daniel said, his voice low and steady. "Earthborns don't give up." Volcari's breath came in ragged gasps as he struggled beneath Daniel's hold, his body refusing to move. For a long moment, there was only silence, the sound of labored breathing filling the arena. And then finally, the command came. "Victory to Daniel Carter." The arena erupted into applause, the sound deafening as Daniel stood over his fallen opponent. His body ached with exhaustion, but the rush of victory, the proof of his strength, overshadowed everything. But even as the cheers rang out, Daniel knew this fight wasn't over. This victory was only the beginning. There would be more challenges, more battles to face. The Academy wasn't going to give up on pushing him to the limits of his endurance. He turned, his eyes scanning the crowd. Among the cadets, some looked at him with newfound respect. Others still saw him as a threat, a curiosity. But for the first time since his arrival, Daniel felt like maybe, just maybe, he was starting to belong. The cheers of the Academy cadets reverberated in Daniel's ears as he limped out of the arena, his body still buzzing from the intense fight with Volcari. Despite the bruises, the soreness, and the constant throbbing in his ribs, there was a sense of pride that he couldn't shake. The Academy, for all its grandeur and pomp, had never seen a human like him, had never seen anyone like him. As Daniel passed through the archway, he saw Jorak and Kel waiting near the exit. Jorak, the four-armed Avani, was the first to step forward, his wide grin filling his face. "You're a damn legend now, Earthborn," Jorak said, clapping Daniel on the back. Daniel winced at the touch, his muscles still tense from the fight, but he didn't mind. The camaraderie was something he had never expected to find here. "You're the one who kept telling me I could do this," Daniel replied, breathing deeply as the adrenaline began to ebb. Kel, the Saurian tech runner, said nothing at first, just gave Daniel a long, appraising look. Then, with a rare, sardonic smile, he spoke. "You've made quite the impression. I think even the more enthusiastic cadets will have a hard time ignoring you after that." Daniel couldn't help but chuckle despite the pain. The pride in his chest was still burning, but now it had a sharper edge. He wasn't just fighting for his place anymore. He was fighting to change the galaxy's perception of humanity. The first Earthborn cadet to make it this far. The first to defeat Volcari. The first to stand tall in the face of prejudice and mockery. But the feeling didn't last long. As Daniel limped past the crowd of cadets still lingering near the arena, he noticed something different. A cadet, tall, broad-shouldered, with a cold, calculating gaze, was watching him. The cadet's eyes didn't gleam with admiration or respect. They were hard, critical. They stared through Daniel like he wasn't even there, as if Daniel's victory had been nothing more than a fluke. The cadet's name was Zarnok. He was from the Polari Confederacy, a faction that had long been skeptical of Earthborn's place in the galaxy. Zarnok's species was one of the most ancient and technologically advanced in the galaxy. They had fought countless wars, and their military tactics were legendary. Zarnok had earned his place at the Academy through his prowess in strategy and combat. His reputation, like Volcari's, was nearly unmatched. And it was clear he didn't think much of Daniel. "Congratulations, Earthborn," Zarnok said coldly as Daniel passed by. His tone was laced with sarcasm. "For a moment I thought you might actually die in there, but I see I was mistaken. Perhaps humans do have some use after all." Daniel's jaw tightened. He had no love for the Polari Confederacy, no respect for their self-important attitude. He wasn't here to play their game. He was here to prove that humanity wasn't inferior. He wasn't going to let Zarnok's disdain stop him now. "Keep talking, Zarnok," Daniel replied evenly, meeting the cadet's gaze with an unflinching stare. "One day you'll have to realize that it's not about how many battles you've won, it's about what you're willing to fight for." Zarnok's lips curled into a mocking smile, but he didn't say another word. Instead, he turned and walked away, his cadre of followers trailing behind him like shadows. Daniel's heart still pounded from the fight, but a new kind of weight settled in his chest. The victory over Volcari was only the beginning, he knew. The real challenge was what lay ahead, the subtle political games, the whispers in the hallways, the subtle discrimination that came with being the first human to make it into the Peacekeeper Academy. But there was something else, something more important. There were cadets, real fighters, who had just seen what a human could do. The word had already spread, and he couldn't afford to slow down now. Daniel walked into the medical bay, the lights overhead flickering in time with the thrum of his pulse. His body was battered, but not broken. The injuries from the earlier test were still raw, but now he was a different kind of cadet, one who had survived, one who had proven himself. The medical staff knew him well now, having treated him more times than he cared to count, but this time there was a change in their demeanor. The Earthborn wasn't just a curiosity anymore. He was a problem. The physician, a human woman with a steady hand and a sharp mind, took one look at Daniel's battered body and sighed. "You're pushing yourself too hard, Carter," she said, unwrapping the bandages from his ribs with practiced precision. "This won't heal if you keep going at this rate. I don't care how tough you think you are." Daniel winced as she adjusted the bandages around his ribs. "I've had worse. Just give me the clearance to keep going." The physician raised an eyebrow. "You have had worse, but this isn't just about your body. It's your future we're talking about. You're on the edge of something big, Daniel, but if you break now, it won't matter how much potential you have. You'll be sidelined, just like every other Earthborn who came before you." Daniel's eyes hardened as he glanced up at the physician. "I'm not going to be sidelined." Her gaze softened for a moment, but only for a second. She gave him the injection he needed to keep the pain down, but Daniel could tell there was concern beneath her calm exterior. This wasn't just about physical healing anymore. The pressure was mounting, and he was feeling it. When the treatment was over, Daniel limped out of the medical bay and back into the corridors of the academy. As he walked, the whispers began again. Cadets who once ignored him now turned their heads to stare. Some nodded in respect. Others shot him contemptuous looks, but none of them were laughing now. No, this time it was different. Daniel had made them respect him, at least for now. He passed the training halls, the sounds of combat echoing within. The academy was more than just a school. It was a proving ground, a place where every cadet had to fight to be seen, and Daniel had fought his way into their consciousness. But the weight of his victory hung heavy on him. He had won, yes, but there was more to do, so much more. That evening, after a long day of tests and drills, Daniel found himself back in the dormitory. The quiet hum of the academy's machinery was the only sound in the room as he sat on the edge of his cot, staring at the ceiling. His foot still throbbed, his ribs burned, and his thoughts were clouded with uncertainty. But then his compad buzzed. He opened the message with a mix of curiosity and dread. It was from Commander Havett. The words were short and direct. "Tomorrow, combat orientation. Earthborn exceptional case. Mandatory observation. Report at 900 hours. Do not be late." The words made Daniel's stomach twist. He had thought the worst was over, but Havett was right. This was only the beginning. The sterile halls of the Galactic Peacekeeper Academy seemed more suffocating today than they had ever felt before. Daniel Carter walked through them with a sense of purpose, his movements deliberate and measured despite the lingering pain from his earlier battles. The victory over Volcari had been a turning point, but now that victory felt like a distant memory. Today was different. The weight of the upcoming trial sat heavily on his shoulders. Commander Havett's message had been blunt: combat orientation, Earthborn exceptional case, mandatory observation. The words replayed in his mind like an ominous drumbeat. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. This was about proving that he belonged here. The Academy's future and humanity's place within it rested on his performance today. As Daniel made his way to the combat orientation hall, the air felt thicker than usual, charged with tension. He could hear the low hum of cadets talking, the clattering of armor, and the sounds of practice weapons being readied. It all sounded so foreign to him, a reminder that no matter how far he'd come, he was still an outsider. When he entered the hall, his gaze immediately fell on the center of the room. The floor was set up like a battlefield. Scattered debris, walls to climb over, obstacles designed to test not just combat skills but ingenuity. At the far end of the room stood a massive, humanoid combat drone, its body built for combat, designed to simulate a dangerous enemy in real-world scenarios. "Carter," came the voice of Commander Havett from behind him. Daniel turned to see the commander standing with a few other senior officers, his expression unreadable. "This is your final test." Daniel nodded, his jaw set. "What's the scenario?" "You'll be fighting this," Havett gestured toward the massive combat drone. "But it's not just about strength, it's about endurance. The drone has been programmed with multiple attack modes. You'll need to survive for 30 minutes. If you're incapacitated before then, you fail." 30 minutes, Daniel repeated, the challenge of it sinking in. The drone was no slouch, and the idea of surviving against it for half an hour made his stomach tighten. But he couldn't back down now. "Yes, the drone is fast, precise, and relentless," Havett continued, his tone almost clinical. "But don't forget, this is about more than just physical strength. It's about adaptability. The Peacekeepers don't fight by the same rules that the rest of the galaxy follows. You will be tested in ways you can't predict. You'll need to think fast, act decisively, and rely on every skill you've acquired." Daniel's heart rate quickened. He knew what this meant. this wasn't a simple battle. This was about showing the Academy, showing the galaxy that humanity wasn't just capable of fighting, it was capable of surviving, thriving, and adapting to anything thrown its way. With a final nod to have it, Daniel stepped forward, taking his place in the center of the arena. The drone's eyes flickered to life, its robotic gaze locking onto Daniel with a chilling precision. The countdown began, and Daniel's pulse spiked. Combat orientation, start in 3, 2, 1. The drone moved faster than Daniel anticipated, its servos whirring with mechanical precision as it rushed toward him, a blur of metallic limbs. He barely had time to react. It reached him with a speed he wasn't expecting, its massive arm swinging toward him in a deadly arc. Daniel twisted his body, narrowly avoiding the strike. He rolled, pushing himself up onto his feet, barely making it out of the way as the drone's fist slammed into the floor with a deafening crack. His heart pounded, but he didn't freeze. He couldn't. The drone's next move was a rapid series of jabs aimed at his torso. Daniel dodged, his body moving on instinct, the adrenaline sharpening his mind. He knew he couldn't afford to be caught. The drone was too powerful, too fast. As the drone lunged again, Daniel ducked low, sweeping his leg under it, trying to knock it off balance. The drone staggered, but its self-correcting systems immediately compensated. It didn't fall. Instead, it spun with unnatural speed and kicked out, its foot catching Daniel in the side and sending him sprawling across the floor. Pain shot through his ribs, but Daniel didn't hesitate. He rolled, his body responding instinctively, pushing himself back to his feet. He couldn't waste time. Every second in this fight mattered. The drone advanced again, its movements calculated and ruthless. Daniel's mind raced. He couldn't fight it head-on. He needed to use the environment to outsmart it, to survive long enough for the test to end. His eyes flicked around the arena, searching for something, anything, that could give him an advantage. Then he saw it. There behind the drone, a stack of debris had been placed in the arena as an obstacle. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Daniel darted toward the pile, his mind working quickly. He needed to make the drone follow him, to get it to overcommit to a move it couldn't recover from. The drone's sensors whirred, tracking his every movement, but Daniel was already moving. He dove behind the debris, using the pile as cover, and waited. The drone paused, scanning the area with its cold, mechanical eyes. It didn't know where he had gone. The seconds stretched out as Daniel crouched low, steadying his breath. His foot still ached, his ribs still throbbed, but this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a test of his ability to think under pressure, to adapt. He heard the drone move, the soft whirring of its servos signaling its approach. The moment it was close enough, Daniel burst from behind the debris, his foot finding the perfect angle to sweep under the drone's leg. The mechanical beast stumbled forward, its heavy frame crashing toward the ground. It wasn't enough to disable it, but it bought Daniel time. The drone's movements were still precise, its body recovering quickly, but Daniel had learned something. He had outsmarted it, and in a place like this, that was enough. The arena seemed to stretch out before him. Every move, every second felt like it would be his last. The drone wasn't slowing down, it was adapting to him as he adapted to it. The gap between victory and failure had never felt so narrow. Each minute was an eternity. Daniel had only 5 minutes left. He struck again, not with brute force, but with purpose. His knee struck the drone's center, its weak point, sending a vibration through its core. For a moment, the drone faltered, its systems struggling to maintain balance. Daniel didn't hesitate. He rolled to the side, grabbing a nearby training weapon, a blunt metallic pole. It was heavy, but he swung it toward the drone's side, using the blunt force to target its joints. The drone's arm twisted unnaturally, its movements slowing. He had it, but not yet. The arena went eerily quiet as the drone powered down, its glowing red lights dimming to a flicker. The hum of the artificial gravity fields and distant machinery became all that could be heard. Daniel stood frozen, still gripping the metallic pole, sweat dripping down his face. His chest rose and fell with rapid, shallow breaths, but his mind was reeling. Had he failed? He glanced around, looking for any sign of what had just happened. The countdown had ended and the final blow had been blocked. But he hadn't lost, had he? His body ached from the strain, his injuries weighing heavily on him, but he was still standing. So why had the system called it an abort? Daniel took a few hesitant steps back, dropping the pole. The crowd of cadets was silent, their faces unreadable. He couldn't tell if they were disappointed, confused, or relieved. Then came the voice over the intercom, cold and dispassionate. Test failure, mission abort. Daniel's stomach churned. Failure? That wasn't possible. He'd made it through. He'd outwitted the drone. He had been surviving, winning, even up until the last moment. What had gone wrong? He heard the low murmur of cadets around him, their whispers rising as they processed what had just occurred. Some looked satisfied, others less so. But it wasn't the cadets that Daniel was focused on now. It was Commander Havett who was walking toward him, his footsteps echoing like distant thunder. Havett's expression was unreadable, as usual, but his eyes bore a weight of something far deeper than the usual tactical assessment. He stopped in front of Daniel, studying him for a long moment. "You did well, Carter," Havett said at last, his tone neutral but with a trace of something resembling approval. "Better than expected, in fact, but the test wasn't about winning. It was about adapting to the unexpected, and you didn't." Daniel's confusion deepened. "What do you mean, the drone? It malfunctioned. I was still fighting." Havett's eyes hardened, and he folded his arms across his chest. "The drone did what it was supposed to do, but your fight wasn't the problem. It was the environment." He paused, giving Daniel a long look. "You didn't engage with the obstacles the way you should have. The arena isn't just a place for physical combat, it's a test of adaptability. You didn't use the environment to your advantage. Instead, you focused solely on defeating the drone. That's what led to your failure." Daniel stood still, processing the commander's words. The pressure, the constant pain from his injuries had clouded his judgment. In the heat of the battle, he'd focused too much on the drone, pushing himself to beat it physically without considering the surroundings. The entire arena had been designed to force cadets to adapt, to think, but Daniel had acted as though it was just another fight. Havett wasn't wrong. He had failed the test not because he wasn't strong enough, but because he hadn't been smart enough. The commander's eyes softened just a fraction. "This isn't just about surviving the fight. It's about surviving the context. That's what separates peacekeepers from other soldiers." Daniel exhaled sharply, letting the weight of the lesson sink in. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was something else entirely. He had to be more. The Academy, the galaxy, was demanding more from him than just raw strength. The commander turned to leave but paused at the door. "You'll be in observation tomorrow. The next phase will require more than just combat. It'll require cooperation. Be ready." That evening, Daniel returned to his dorm, his body sore and bruised, but his mind racing. The failure of the test gnawed at him like a persistent itch he couldn't reach. He had spent so long fighting for a place here, for the respect he believed he deserved. But the truth was, he wasn't just fighting other cadets or the Academy's tests. He was fighting himself, the stubborn part of him that insisted brute force could solve everything. He sat at his desk, the room dimly lit by the soft glow of his compad. The device flickered, and a message notification popped up. It was from Jorak. "Meet me in the gym in 30 minutes. You need to talk. This isn't over yet." Daniel didn't even hesitate. Jorak had been a friend since the first day. Even though the Avani cadet was as hard as steel, he understood the importance of this journey. Daniel stood, his legs stiff and sore, and grabbed his training gear. He needed answers, and he needed to understand what had gone wrong. The gym was nearly empty when Daniel arrived. The sound of punching bags swinging in the background and the rhythmic thud of feet on the floor was the only sound in the vast room. Jorak was there, waiting, his 4 arms folded across his chest, his sharp eyes watching Daniel approach. "I saw your fight," Jorak said, his voice quiet but firm. "You were too focused on the drone. The other cadets saw it too. You could have used the arena, the obstacles, to your advantage. The Academy doesn't just test you on how you fight, it tests you on how you think." Daniel nodded, the sting of failure still fresh in his chest. "I know, I got too caught up in it. I thought I had to beat it, defeat it, you know." Jorak stepped forward, placing one massive hand on Daniel's shoulder. "That's the human way, always fighting, always pushing. But that's not what's needed here, not all the time. Sometimes you have to stop fighting and start thinking. The galaxy's not going to bow down to you just because you can punch your way through it. You have to adapt." The words stung, but they were true. Daniel realized that he had been thinking like a soldier, not a peacekeeper. Soldiers fought, peacekeepers thought and adapted. This wasn't about winning battles, it was about winning the war of the mind. "Tomorrow," Jorak continued, "you'll be tested on your ability to cooperate with others. You can't do this alone, you never could." Daniel's fists clenched. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." You won't be, Jorek said simply. Not at first, but you'll learn, we all do. You're not the only one who's struggling, but you're the first human to get this far. Don't waste that. It's your time to show them what Earthborns can do. As Daniel stood in the gym, the weight of Jorak's words hung heavy on him. His failure was not the end. It was just another step in the long road ahead. The next test would not be about fighting. It would be about working with others, learning to trust them, to work as a team. But as Daniel walked back to his dorm that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play. The academy wasn't just testing him as a cadet. It was testing humanity itself. And in the end, it wasn't just about passing the tests. It was about changing the future. The stark metal doors of the training hall slid open with a hiss, and Daniel Carter stepped inside, his breath shallow with anticipation. The usual hum of energy in the academy's walls seemed louder now, almost oppressive, as if the entire structure was holding its breath. This was it, the final test. No more drills, no more challenges that could be easily explained away. Daniel stood in the center of the room, his eyes scanning the faces of his teammates, each one a different alien species. The team was diverse, each cadet possessing a unique skill set, a different strength. Some had finely tuned reflexes, others were masters of strategy, while some were simply brute forces of nature. But they all had one thing in common: distrust. They hadn't been happy when they'd seen the new Earthborn cadet assigned to their team. They hadn't been happy when the Academy decided to test human cooperation in a live simulation, where failure meant something far worse than just a bad grade. This wasn't just about the physical. This was about working together. Daniel swallowed hard, his body still aching from the training. His ribs pulsed with each breath, and the boot on his foot felt like a heavy anchor. But none of that mattered. Today, the Academy would learn whether Earthborns could not only survive but adapt to the complex realities of the galaxy. Commander Havitt's voice rang out from above, cold and mechanical. Simulation, hostile zone recovery. You are in a compromised environment. Your objective is to extract a VIP from a hostile facility. The facility is booby-trapped and enemy forces are on high alert. There are no backup systems. You have 60 minutes. The words echoed in Daniel's mind as he watched his new team gather around him. His squad included Jorak, the four-armed Avani, Kel, the Saurian tech specialist, and 3 others, a quiet, cold-eyed Mari, a lean, lithe kitten scout, and a towering, heavily armored Urak from the rugged planet of Ston. Their faces were unreadable, their eyes narrowed in suspicion as they eyed the human in their midst. "All right, Earthborn," the kitten scout said, her voice cutting through the tension. "What do you bring to the table? Can you even keep up?" Daniel locked eyes with her. She was the quickest, the most agile member of the squad, and she hadn't hidden her disdain for humans from the start. "You'll see," Daniel said evenly. He wasn't here to argue, he was here to prove something. The simulation began immediately. The environment shifted in an instant. One moment they were in the Academy's pristine training hall, the next they were standing in a simulated war zone. The air was thick with smoke, the ground cracked and scorched. The enemy forces were represented by automated drones and simulated alien troops, their movements sharp, precise, and calculated. The timer in the corner of the room began to tick down. The objective was clear: get to the VIP, an important diplomat from a neutral system, and extract him safely before the enemy could capture or kill him. The problem? The whole facility was rigged to explode, and the enemy forces were everywhere. The clock was ticking, and every decision could be the difference between life and death. "Form up," Daniel ordered, surprising himself with the command. He had no rank here. He was the outsider, the Earthborn, but instinct took over. They needed leadership, and he would provide it. The team shuffled into position, forming a loose perimeter around him. "Jorak, you take point. You know this area better than anyone," Daniel said. "Kel, cover us from the rear. I'll stay in the middle and coordinate. Everyone else, keep your heads down and move fast." The kitten scout shot him an amused glance. "So you can give orders, Earthborn?" she mocked, but Daniel ignored her. His plan was solid, and she would see that soon enough. Jorak moved ahead, his 4 arms swinging in precise arcs as he tested each step, the heavy sound of his boots echoing through the debris-strewn hallways. Kel, the tech specialist, fiddled with his compad, sending out pulses to scan the area for hidden explosives or enemy signals. The Mari cadet, silent as always, kept her distance, eyes scanning for any movement. Daniel's heart was racing, the pressure mounting with every step. He could feel the eyes of his teammates on him, waiting to see if he would falter, if he would prove them right, that humans were not cut out for this kind of mission. But Daniel knew something they didn't. This was his fight, and he wasn't about to fail. Minutes passed, and the environment around them seemed to shift with every movement. The enemy drones appeared in flashes, moving from shadow to shadow, their glowing red sensors searching for any sign of life. Daniel's team remained hidden, sticking to the edges of the corridors, using every piece of cover they could find. The kitten scout moved like a whisper, silent and fluid, covering the perimeter with ease. The Urak's massive frame moved cautiously, but his presence was a silent promise that no one would get through them without facing the consequences. Daniel kept pace with Jorak, who was already a step ahead, clearing corners and scanning for traps. As they moved deeper into the compound, Daniel's mind was a blur of calculations. He was adapting now, using his knowledge of urban warfare and the training he had been put through in the academy. "Volkari, this is the Earthborn," he said suddenly, his voice carrying the weight of his frustration. The Volkari cadet had been his first obstacle. He had endured the humiliation, but now he was facing a true test. "The Volkari cadet will not let you down. I will destroy them for good." As the team reached the central control room, they were met with the sound of heavy doors slamming shut. "Listen to me, Carter," he said firmly,